It started with the biggest pipe bomb the FBI had ever seen.
There is a bomb in Centennial Park. You have 30 minutes.
It ended in a dumpster after the largest manhunt in American history.
My knees knocked so hard that I was about to answer them. That's how nervous I was.
Eric Rudolph and the rise of anger.
Domestic terrorism has been metastasizing across the country for a long time now.
True story, true crime, true consequences for us all.
American Shrapnel, from award-winning journalists Becca Andrews and John Archibald, two-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Now available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Pennsylvania High School Football Report podcast. I'm Brian Linder. I'm here with Eric Epler.
What's up?
Eric, what's up, my man?
How's things going?
Dan Sostek.
Blah.
You guys know what they sound like. We always do that, so you'll recognize the voices throughout the podcast. Guys, as we start this podcast, and we're really going to get into it, we're going to dive deep back to the last quarter of a century that we surveyed in the Mid-Penn area, that we surveyed coaches and talked to people about. Real quick, though, football season is underway. We had heat acclimation started, saw some stuff out there.
Earliest heat acclimations, I think, recently. It's not that hot out.
Yeah, everybody tries to always say there's a difference between that and practice. They're practicing football, so practice has started. It is a little warm out there, Dan, for Pennsylvania, but it's been worse for sure.
In my head, when heat ac comes, maybe it's because the ones when you're going there and it's like your first time out of practice all year, it just feels way hotter and you just remember the really hot days. But there can be some really brutal heat ac days. I bet if you talk to most of these kids, they would say that this is probably like a 5 or a 6, which I think is a good one to ease into it.
Yeah, you get a good sweat going out there for sure. The joints, get lubed up with sweat and stuff. But
I'm trying to I'm trying to get 10,000 steps a day, and so I'm not dying of sweat when I do that this week. So that's
all you got to do is get up in the morning and walk to Shippensburg and back.
Yeah, that might be 5K though.
So I was looking, guys, and obviously with the season starting, there's a lot of preseason stuff out there. We've got a lot of stuff that we put out, a lot of stuff coming. One of the things I thought I saw a lot of people talking about before we kind of dive into our big piece here, but I saw Max Preps put out their own version of the top 10 for the state. I know Eric Epler kind of digs into it and really goes in depth with the classifications and stuff, and Ep will have his preseason rankings out soon enough, I'm sure. Ep, when are those coming? Any idea?
They are due out August 11th. So it would be next month or Monday coming up, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So Epler's a couple days away, and that's all classifications. This list's pretty interesting, guys. They had St. Joe's Prep 1, LaSalle 2, Harrisburg 3, McDevitt 4. Statewide, interesting, you get the 2 Philly schools, and you really get the 2 Harrisburg schools, 1, 2, 3, 4. How you feeling about that top 4?
Well, it was interesting. I was kind of clocking there, High School Football America, with who run by Jeff Fisher, who covered Texas football for generations, really. He puts out a top 300 early in the summer. And then eventually what happens is they kickstart their algorithm and then they pairs them down to a top 25, their preseason top 25. And, traditionally I get calls on some of these national rankings for Pennsylvania. And, I don't think I've uttered anyone other than St. Joe's Prep as potentially top 10 in my lifetime, to be honest with you, strictly because obviously there's just some, you're fighting an uphill battle for trying
basically have to be an NFL team in high school.
You're basically trying to convince people that, even a program like St. Joe's Prep is more dominant than some of these schools in California and obviously Florida and Texas and a couple other states, and it's a tough thing to do, even though I think they belong. So I don't the top 100 they pared down High School Football America, and obviously there were 3 schools that were involved: St. Joe's Prep, LaSalle, and Pittsburgh Central Catholic was the other one. McDevitt was just on the outside, so obviously they're down to 25 and coming out soon. I think that's legit. I mean, you talk about the top four, their PA rankings. I don't know the ins and outs of their algorithm. I don't always agree with their rankings, obviously, because since I do Pennsylvania. So, but yeah, I can't argue with that. I think you start 6A and you start with St. Joe's Prep all the time. And this year, there's a belief out there too. And on paper, we talked enough about LaSalle and a couple of the big guns who are playing for the Explorers are back for the Explorers. So, I think having those guys in Harrisburg in the mix, you certainly have to put Harrisburg as the district favorite in 3. So obviously that puts them in the state semifinals every year. So that's top 4 in PA. So I'm okay with the top 4.
I'm interested. I mean, this is like Captain Obvious statement, but I'm so excited for the McDevitt Harrisburg game because, I think on paper Harrisburg is rightfully ahead of McDevitt in these rankings, but I also think that this McDevitt team is going to look a lot different, and I think the way they're going to play football this year might lend itself well to kind of making that game a real tough one for Harrisburg because of how good I think that McDevitt defense could end up being. Now, that's easier said now before they have to go up against Elias Koch and Messiah Mickens and have Kevin Brown and tackle and everything. But I've said it all offseason. I think that McDevitt linebacking core is going to be arguably the best in the entire state. I think that their secondary is going to be much improved, even with losing Fuentes Bream to West York. Tyler Reinhardt's a really good player. They've got a lot of young corners there as well. They've got a really good wide receiver room, a really good running back room. The line's just going to be good. I think at this point you can just pencil in the McDevitt offensive line being good. So I'm really excited to see that because I think, I don't think a win for McDevitt would necessarily mean those rankings are wrong because it would be so early in the year, but it would be kind of a statement. And I think the thing that kind of surprised me with the McDevitt ranking though is how much separation they gave them and Pine Richland, because I think Pine Richland's right there with. Honestly, I was kind of surprised, how low Pine Richland was in the rankings. Not low. There's, we know how these work. They're kind of separated by little factors, but I think that Pine Richland team is going to be really, really hard to beat over in Western PA because they add Khalil Taylor to that group. It's going to be very difficult to play a team like that's that well coached with that much talent. So I think Harrisburg though is the right number 3 there.
Yeah, but if you look at it, I think the thing that's interesting is Harrisburg opens with Imhotep, right? And Imhotep is 9th right now on these rankings. We'll see where they are in our rankings, which are the real rankings that matter here. But I always talk about it. Everybody has an opinion, position to look at them. And I do think Max Preps is based off an algorithm, as Eric brought up. But Harrisburg opens with Imhotep, and then they'll play Bishop McDevitt. Dan and I were talking about this game. I love Jeff Wechter. He and I have a great relationship. I actually think the world of him. Been very good to me. I think Harrisburg might punch McDevitt in the mouth this year, man. I think they got 3 guys that, McDevitt's got some good players, but I don't think they got 3 guys who can really mess with Elias Koch, who can really mess with Kevin Brown up front on both sides, and who can really mess with Messiah. I think Messiah Mickens. Here's one I'll flip to you before we jump into the top 25 too, guys, and sort of transition this real quick. If I had to pick two guys in the state I'm most excited to see this year, it'd be Messiah Mickens and Keemon Spell from McKees Rocks. I think those 2 running backs are going to go off this year. Messiah's been working with Lance Dean, who's trains the stars like Micah Parsons, and I think he's ready to go, man.
Yeah, I mean, when I said I'm excited for that game, it's because I don't actually think it's going to be the same contour of a game if it's going to be an exciting game as last. I think McDevitt's chance to win that game is ball control, limit Messiah Mickens, which I think they might be I think they're the only team in the area that has a shot at limiting that Harrisburg offense with the versatility of that linebacking group. But I think that the way you do it is to limit those possessions because, like you said, when you have Messiah and you have Elias Koch and you have Kevin Brown, that's a pretty good recipe with those 3. And then you're not even talking about Demir Arp. And heck, if Michael Shank breaks out this year, then you're talking about Harris being a state title contender.
And that really could be the X factor in the game because Epler, for everybody I mentioned, the one X factor is Michael Shanks. We think is going to be given the keys to the car here. Jaylon Lewis is still going to be lined up at wide receiver. So if you got to call on an emergency guy who got it done last year, you can call on Jaylon Lewis. But Michael Shanks, we expect to probably be starting under center for Harrisburg. And then we got the other young guy. Why am I drawing a blank on his name all of a sudden? We said it a million times. For McDevitt.
Demir Arp.
Quarterback.
Demir Arp.
The quarterback from McDevitt.
Demir Arp. Oh, Sebastian Williams.
Yeah.
Sebastian Williams. There you go. Sebastian Williams. We've heard big things about him, but both of these guys are going to be thrown into a big, big game week 2. Of course, we'll probably know a good bit about Shank after Emotep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So McDevitt has a pretty good opener too, right? They play the
kind of team from Canada.
Yeah, they're playing the North. I mean, I don't expect them to have major troubles playing them, but it was a good squad. Obviously, they gave Imhotep a little bit of a run last year in that York Rose Bowl thing, so they're back to play McDevitt. But yeah, I mean, if you think one of those teams should be a little bit more ahead of the curve, obviously, I think it would be Harrisburg, because you have that fail safe in Jaylon Lewis. If things go awry early, and Shanks an athlete too. So obviously, you can maybe find another gap.
I will say about Shank, I've seen him throwing the ball at some of these camps. He throws a really gorgeous, like you can see why they want.
I'm not wishing him ill will.
I'm just saying.
I think there's a confidence that Harrisburg should have, more so than McDevitt, even though Sebastian Williams looks the part, plays the part. Everybody says he's going to be fine. It's still going to take reps for him to get up to speed. I mean, let's face it, both of these teams are going to figure it out. I've seen years where both teams struggled out of the gate, figured it out week 3 or 4. And realistically, if McDevitt's line stays healthy, that's the big issue for me, because I don't think they're particularly deep up front. But they are solid. They are going to be solid. Harrisburg has that sort of built in, but it's the same thing for Harrisburg too. We how many times have we watched Harrisburg and they've got 30 guys?
Yeah.
So,
that's what's so impressive about them is where
health is a big part of this first 5 weeks for these guys, because again, I don't love the power ratings. I understand the use of them, but realistically, the regular season in the Mid-Penn is about building steam for the playoffs for these teams. It is. I mean, if McDevitt goes 5-5, they make the playoffs. If Harrisburg goes 6-4, they make the playoffs. So, again, I think it's all about feeling out where you're strong. Harrisburg and McDevitt are both strong at a lot of different places. So that's a great situation for Shank and for Williams to step into this and have all these sort of safeguards around you for the first couple of weeks to get acclimated and feel good and move forward. So, yeah, they both should be, ahead of the curve.
If McDevitt wins and they put me on the billboard and a couple guys want to come out for saying I think Harrisburg might punch him in the mouth. Hey man, I've always said I got no problem with anybody proving me wrong, but Harrisburg week in and week out is going to have 3 guys, in my opinion, that aren't just talent wise maybe the best in the state, some of the best in the country, but physically, you guys saw Elias this year. He's looking big, strong. Kevin Brown looks like a freaking WWE champion. And then Messiah, I mean, physically, they might be the best at their positions in the state this year. So that's always going to be a big advantage when you get those type of dogs. So real quick before we jump into the top 25, Dan, give me 2 guys from the state who you are most excited to see this year now that we had the season going. Put them out there.
I mean, I think the number one, Ep kind of hinted at a little bit, but Gavin Sidwar is just, I'm really excited. He's just been so steady throughout his entire career. I think he kind of, his first start actually might have been against McDevitt early in his career when he was a freshman or a sophomore. And the improvements he's made, we've all talked to him. He's a super mature kid too. He just feels like a kid that as a senior is going to be ready to kind of take the entire state by storm.
LaSalle College quarterback, Missouri commit. For people that don't know.
Yeah, so I just feel like he's a guy that obviously if you're going to an SEC school from PA, you must be pretty darn good. So he's obviously one. And then, I'll go a little home cooking and say I'm excited to see what Reston Lehman does from Peters Township. I know that the Pitt Panther, my alma mater, Pitt Panthers, are really excited to get that kid. I think he's 6'4", 230 as a senior edge rusher for Peters Township, who's obviously been one of the best teams in the Whitfield for the last almost. I can't even date it, but I'm excited to see what he does with that team because they're seemingly always in the mix to be in at Cumberland Valley at the end of the year. So whenever you get those edge rushers who are seniors, we've seen it before with local guys. When you're that fully kind of built into that senior high school body, you can have a huge year. So that's another guy I'm looking at this year.
I gave you guys the running backs up real quick. Give us two quick guys around the state you would pay money to see this year. You're excited to see.
As a junior, and he plays at why I'm missing Justice Hardy.
Oh yeah,
would be a guy that I think I love watching these guys who are just like workhorses, and no matter what they're asked to do, and Hardy is asked to do a lot. He did a hell of a lot as a sophomore last year, and he's picking up the pace in the recruiting game. I think Liberty came on board a little while ago, but he's just one of those hard-nosed football players that you appreciate the work he does. And why missing is going to be obviously in the mix again. They're going to be they're one of two, I would say, favorites for the D3 title. I think they can make another state run. I don't know how deep, but we'll think about that a little bit before we hammer out the final rankings. But he's a guy. And then on the other side of the state, Matt Sig for Fort Cherry. We've had him on this podcast. I think he's a great kid. I think he's a great leader. And he's a lot like Justy, too. Like, he's a guy that everyone follows. And obviously, the Rangers go as he goes. So, probably going to wind up as a safety. I guess in college, we talked about that, or a corner. But yeah, I really like him under center and just the kind of dazzling things he does. So I think he's going to have a monster senior year.
As good as he is, running the football, you watch that film of him playing safety for them. He covers a ton of ground on the back end, and he'll go hit you too for a guy that's playing quarterback. So let's pop, because it's going to take us a little bit here. Pop into this project we have, which we're doing. Now we're in the new century here. We're 25 years in. And we wanted to look back at the last quarter of a century. We're doing it for all different sports, but particularly for football in the Mid-Penn Conference. And we did, Epler put it together. I know you surveyed a lot of coaches and talked to a lot of people, but it was the top 25 players of the first 25 years of the century. The list is out. A lot of debate out in the community. You always expect that with these lists, but I thought it was a pretty solid list. And like I said, we got 25 names to go through. We want to run down them real quick. Why don't I do put 5 at a time out, and then we just talk about them. That way we might get to them. You want to do it that way, or you want to go individually?
Yeah, however you want to do it's fine.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do first 5 on your list was Pete Anastasio, the linebacker for Camp Hill, 2010 graduate. Macklin Ayers, quarterback, defensive back from Upper Dauphin, a 2020 graduate. Brighton Barr, a linebacker from Mechanicsburg, a 2012 graduate. Harold Brantley, the defensive lineman from Hershey, a 2012 graduate. And Adam Brenneman, a name a lot of people know, tight end from Cedar Cliff, 2013 graduate. There's your first 5 on your list. What's jumping off there, guys?
Well, if you notice the trend, I just mentioned 2 guys that you asked me I'm looking forward to seeing and following this year, and I mentioned those kind of do everything guys. The first 3 guys in the list, Anastasio, Macklin Ayers, and of course Brighton Barr, were exactly that way. They all were just physical monsters and would rip you to shreds. But Macklin obviously played quarterback, played defensive back, played linebacker. I think he punted and kicked too. He was just one of those guys. And Brighton Barr, everybody knows, probably more so for his college story on how his college career lasted 7 years with 2 medicals. 2 medical years, but obviously a big 33 guy. There's a lot of big 33 guys on this list. But Bart was a tackling machine. I mean, it was ridiculous. Like, it was almost we talked a little bit too about Forrest Ryan in Waynesboro a couple weeks back about how the stats would come in, and we were like, man, did he really have 26 tackles? Did he really have 5 sacks in this game? Barr was that kind of player. Barr had 20 plus tackles every game. It didn't matter. It was automatic. No matter who went and watched him, when he came back for the box score, you're like, yeah, there's 22 stops from Brighton Bar. He was that good and that active as a linebacker and a big thumper. He was impressive. Brantley
was the one I wanted to ask about because
you could talk about Brantley, then I'll come back with after that.
Yeah,
well, everybody's always told me Brantley was a beast. Yeah, I didn't see him play, but
because that's what I was going to say. Is I obviously wasn't here for him, but reading his bio, then you include a little picture of him. I don't know how anybody tackled this kid. He's absolutely a 280-pound fullback who ran for 19 touchdowns. And I mean, when you're playing at Hershey, you end up at Missouri. You're doing something right, and then it seems like obviously had some adversity that kind of altered his career path a little bit. But he seems like one of those guys that he was when you were on the sidelines, you had to kind of stay alert and make sure I don't get run over by Harold Brantley.
Brantley was he was born to play football. Like he was a monster, but he was a fantastic interview. Number one, he did nothing but applaud his teammates when everybody knew it was all about him and what he did. But as a defensive tackle and what he kind of turned himself into at Missouri, I mean, you could see it in high school. Obviously, he was gonna play at the next level, and I think that Syracuse was close to nabbing him, but he took Missouri, and then of course had that car accident that kind of just shuffled his career. But he was just so much fun to watch, and you often, or at least I often use the term uncontrollable force. That was Harold Brantley in a nutshell on both sides. And he had no business running the ball, but he was not listed as a fullback. He was a running back, and you couldn't bring him down. You could not bring him down.
It seems like he played. That I feel like that's how Mark Painter wants to play football, right? He wants to kind of play that physical, rushing and attack football. He doesn't care what you look like as long as you can hammer into the other team. It's worth it for him.
That's exactly
probably like you said, if not for the car accident, probably has a longer stay in the NFL. Like I said, he hung around the arena leagues and stuff for a while there. Quick note on the first five: Macklin Ayers is currently in camp, I believe, with the Cleveland Browns as a linebacker.
Working out with Lance Dean earlier.
He worked out with Lance Dean too, and then obviously Adam Brenneman. He retired, when he got to Penn State because of some knee injuries, and we actually, had him up at PennLive a lot around then, and he was running a campaign, Mike Regan's campaign, Chase Regan's dad. He ran that up here. The guy went back and played again at UMass. I think he caught something like 70 balls or something his senior year, basically with no cartilage in his knee, I think, and had a good chance to get drafted basically with no knee, but he decided to retire because he just kept swelling up on him. And so that's the type of player he was. Obviously has a good media career going now, among other things.
Yeah, Brian, I was going to say people were talking about, I know you're familiar with the guy, Brendan Schaub, podcaster, and everyone said, because he got into a feud last year with like Nate Diaz, and people said, people probably forget that he was at one point like a decent heavyweight because he just does so much media and he does so much podcasting. You forget these guys were actually elite level athletes. I do kind of wonder if that's going to happen with Brenneman a little bit, that people are going to forget how good of a football player he was because of how much media he does, and how successful he's been with that. But everyone who was around him at Cedar Cliff talks about it was appointment Fridays to be there and watching him play. He just got inducted to their Hall of Fame last year. So obviously a pretty deserved name on this list. I don't think anyone would argue with it.
Next five on our top 25 players from the Mid-Penn in the first 25 years. Ben Dupree, athlete from Susquehanna Township, 2010 grad. Alex Serby, the quarterback from Steel High, the 2024 grad. Chase Edmonds, the running back from CD East, the 2014 grad. Jalen Fitzpatrick, the quarterback from Harrisburg, a 2011 grad. And Zach Frazier, quarterback from Mechanicsburg, 2006 grad. I think that's 5, might be 6. I don't know. 4. Anyway, tell us about that group, guys.
This is really the most competitive fivesome, if you will, that I've covered, that I've seen play. Ben Dupree, I think his bio sort of says it all on how just absolute dynamic that guy was. And at 5'7", we'll call him 5'7", 5'8". There's a kid, if he was 6 foot tall, I think NFL certainly would have been where he wound up. He just was so electrifying. Brian, you said you knew him a little bit. You were down in South Carolina when he quarterbacked the Citadel. had an unbelievable career at the Citadel and that triple option offense. But at high school, nobody really gave him credit. It was strange because all we would hear about Ben Dupree, and obviously had electrifying numbers week to week, right? But we would always hear this, our sports staff, like he can't, he's not a thrower. He can't throw the ball, has no accuracy, this and that. I completely disagree. Like all of us were like, every long ball he threw seemed to connect. Now, I had some good guys around him, don't get me wrong, who went up and got the ball. But he was just never really appreciated as a passer, too, because he was so good with his feet. So good.
He's one of those city legends, too, that people are always talking about in these, or about being like, because I feel like this is the point of these lists, right? It's not just sorting which players made the NFL and which didn't, right? It's which players kind of had the most impact on the area. And I know Brian's had similar, so obviously you're familiar with him a little bit from Citadel, but anyone you talk to from this area that was around watching him play just raves about Ben Dupree, just say how special of an athlete that guy was.
Yeah.
I didn't personally know him. I lived in Low Country, South Carolina. The Citadel, I got the Post and Courier paper, which was the biggest in South Carolina, and they covered the Citadel a good bit. And but they were at every game, and Ben was this little guy, and the Citadel got in there and ran for years like the wishbone offense, or whatever. And they had Ben started something like 24, 30 games, something like that, straight at quarterback. This tiny guy, and he ran for a whole bunch of yards for them doing that. The Citadel would go in and, occasionally once or twice they beaten like South Carolina and just running their different offense and stuff. And they would mess around and give a team hell, that they weren't supposed to, running that different offense, that old school stuff. And guys like Ben Dupree, that's where I knew him from. Who else do we have on the list? Obviously, Alex Sherby was up, up there. He's still number 2 in PA in a lot of passing categories. That says a lot. Steel High guy, won 3 state titles up.
Yeah, he inarguable because of the resume.
Yeah, I think his resume speaks for itself. I think Chase Edmonds, obviously, his resume speaks for itself and what that guy turned himself into. Still to this day, I think pound for pound, the toughest runner that I've ever seen in person. And obviously, in this area, you've seen a lot of great running backs, but just a fabulous. He's not a kid anymore, but just back then he was just a fabulous young athlete.
Were you surprised he found his way to the NFL or not at all?
Once he went to Fordham, and obviously I knew Joe Moorhead was there, I thought he might have a shot because Moorhead used him, obviously perfectly, because Moorhead is Moorhead. And, when he started making waves, Patriot League leader and this and that, I don't know if he's still the Patriot League leader, all-time leader, but he's probably on a couple of lists in a couple of categories still. But I thought he might have a shot because he was just he just absorbed everything that he saw and he used it to his advantage. And I figured at worst, he could be a punt returner, that would be a guy that I would want returning kicks and punts. And maybe he gets a shot in camp. And obviously, 7-8 years now, he had in the NFL. So as a running back. So
the crazy thing about Chase Edmonds, Dan, when you see him in person, I've said this, one of my rules for like when a guy's you go to a field and I say if everybody looks the same, that guy's not going to the league and stuff like that. Occasionally there are exceptions to the rule. I've interviewed Chase, went out to a workout a couple years ago. He was working out with Ryan Mackey's. And Chase Edmonds is not a guy you would walk down the street and stop and say, oh, that guy plays in the NFL. If you've ever been in an NFL locker room, there are monsters in there. These guys with giant calves and stuff. And then you go out there and stand on the sideline and, you watch the impact. And you would not think that this guy would be able to do what he has done. He's been a pretty good player at times in NFL too.
He was like
he's not a god that stands out, but he is a good player.
He was like a fantasy league winner a couple of years. Like I remember everyone went from Russia. He had to be a guy you drafted in like the 4th round in fantasy leagues in one year, which for a guy his size is crazy.
Yeah. Just real quick, Brian, Jalen Fitzpatrick was one of the most, one of the smartest quarterbacks that I've seen. The relationship he had with the late George Chomp and how Chomp sort of just molded him, just threw everything at this kid. And he was just an absolute gamer. And he never looked like he panicked ever, this guy. And he was a tremendous passer. and that went on obviously to a really solid career as a wideout at Temple. But just that was the most appealing part about it, because he shouldn't have been playing quarterback, but Chop recognized that this is a guy we need under center, and obviously they won a ton of ball games, and he had an unbelievable final season, one of the best that I've ever seen. I mean, it was like Terrell Pryor numbers, a senior. It was ridiculous. Frazier, the quarterback of Mechanicsburg, for those who know, Rich Lichtel, obviously the late Rich Lichtel, great just head coach, great human being, was like the Don Coryell of the Mid-Penn. Like, he introduced the wide open offense when the Mid-Penn, most of the teams in Mid-Penn were still run, wing T offenses and single backs and twin backs and things like that. He went 5 wide. He knew his line was not, they didn't have 260 across at Mechanicsburg. And Frazier was one of the most accurate guys, quarterbacks that I saw. And obviously he held a lot of records until a bunch of QBs obviously came. He was the class of 2006. So, we had almost 20 years now of guys breaking down his records, but he's still listed top 10 in some categories. But the offense was just so much fun to watch, and Frazier was a great trigger man in it.
On Fitzpatrick, the one thing I'll say before we move on is I'm friends with a lot of guys over in the city, and obviously there's been a lot of discussion about this list. And then there's always discussion around football about guys who are guys. I've seen Jalen Fitzpatrick's name brought up by the guys, a lot of the guys I'm friends with over in the city when they talk about football, how good he was. So, I think outside of that, I think a lot of guys would vouch that kid could play some football. Next 5 on the list: Kyle Friend, offensive lineman, defensive lineman, Cumberland Valley, 2012 grad. Jordan Hill, obviously the fullback defensive tackle, Steel High, 09 grad. Matt Johnson, a Bishop McDevitt quarterback, 2011 grad. Brian Lamel, wide receiver from Bishop McDevitt, a 2013 grad. And one more, right? LaShawn McCoy, running back from Bishop McDevitt.
Yeah.
A lot of McDevitt guys there. Kyle Friend, starting it off. You're 6'2", you're 305. You play in the NFL with the Jets, Steelers, Panthers, and I believe actually stick a little bit, play a little bit. You don't see many 6'2" guards these days anymore, and that wasn't that long ago. And I've always heard he was one tough cat.
Yeah, he was a weight room freak too.
I feel like you have to be right when you're that size.
Yeah, I mean, he just was unbelievably ahead of the game when it comes to like leadership and just lead by example. That was Kyle Friend. And not to mention, he was just an absolute wrecking ball. I don't know how many plays went his way, but it was probably 85%. He was just that good of a blocker, and he was very, very technical. There's another guy on this list named Marty Rao, and those are probably 2 of the most technical guys that I've seen along the line of scrimmage. And so obviously his success, being an all-state guy as well. But yeah, he could have been all-state at either side of the ball. That's how good he was. I don't think anybody will argue that the 3 McDevitt guys that you mentioned in this 5-pack. And the other guy obviously is Steelton Royalty and Jordan Hill. Hill did so much for the program, just elevated it, did whatever was needed. He played along the line if you needed. He played fullback. He played defensive tackle. And obviously they had those 2 straight state titles, and he was a part of this first one.
What a legendary family. The whole like Ryan Hill was on our basketball list. I think he won a state title with Steel High as well. He's his cousin, I believe. And then obviously Lloyd was a heck of a player too.
Absolutely.
I said Big Cat. If Big Cat hears this, I always said Big Cat's like a freak of nature, man. You look at Big Cat, and you might not know that that guy was a good athlete, man. He surprised you, man. You turn on the film, and Lloyd could ball, man. I mean, he went and played in college, so.
Big Cat played in college, and I don't know if you've seen Big Cat.
He's a good dude. He's a good dude.
Felt.
Yeah, he's felt.
I know. I've been following his
felt. I said
brick by brick journey, man.
I said you need a new nickname now, because he's felt now. He's looking.
He's an inspiration.
Yep.
He's an inspiration, but he was really a freak athlete too.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
So I give him all the credit in the world, and he's a good guy. So
I don't think we have to explain LaShawn McCoy too much. I think he kind of speaks.
Yeah,
for
I don't
himself.
think I'll argue against that.
Yeah, you got a potential Hall of Famer there. Matt Johnson, lit it up on the match in action in college. At quarterback. Brian Lamel, a lot of people might forget, but you look up their numbers before Julian Fleming came along, was really one of the, I guess he was probably the most productive wide receiver in Pennsylvania in a lot of categories, had some state records before Fleming came along. So, all those guys to me look like locks. Let's jump into the next group of five. You start with Micah Parsons, defensive end running back from Harrisburg, who you're doing a 25 for 25 list for the state. You might argue that he's up there in the top 2, 3, maybe 1. You never know. But he's there. Adrian Robinson, linebacker from Harrisburg, Wake grad. Artie Rowell, who you mentioned, offensive lineman, defensive tackle from Central Dauphin, 2011 grad. Stone Saunders, a name a lot of people should know, the quarterback from Bishop McDevitt, a 25 grad. And then Drew Scales, split end defensive back, kit returner, Central Dauphin, 2013 grad. Where you want to start there? Start with Parsons. No brainer.
Yeah, I don't think I need to explain Micah's resume.
Yeah.
Again, when you're a 4-year All-State guy, that's very rare. I think probably in my career, maybe 5 or 6 guys have done it that have been 4-year guys. And obviously had 2 really successful seasons at Central Dauphin and then moved on to Harrisburg. But yeah, it just, when you have, there were just hordes of coaches, college recruiters just showing up at Harrisburg, just showing up and just walking around and around. It was almost like they were just like, they could have been trespassed. They were just hanging around campus.
You remember people would hang outside of their games after his junior year with stacks of our photos, Dan, that they printed off, Matt finish and have him autograph them after junior year.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was just, obviously just an unbelievable terror who's still looking for a contract, by the way. But anyway, the other, and Adrian Robinson, a linebacker for Harrisburg. To this day, I still think the 07 Harrisburg defense was probably the best I've ever seen. And Robinson was the leader of that group that went to the state semifinals. He just was an absolute, he was manic about finding the ball carrier. Like, he almost, like we talk a lot about Kevin Brown's energy now. That was Adrian Robinson. Like you couldn't like keep him still. That's the kind of focus and just the kind of drive that he had. An amazing player, an amazing high school prep, obviously, and then, played in the NFL as well. And unfortunately, he passed away in 2015. But it just an unbelievable talent. Unbelievable.
Yep. Yeah. And Artie Rowell, I actually went to Pitt, but I was a year behind him. So I covered him a little bit when I was actually at Pitt. I think when I was at Pitt, I didn't realize he went to I definitely didn't realize at the time that he went to Central Dauphin. I never really put 2 and 2 together. Everything you kind of said in here, though, was everything he was kind of known for at Pitt, was being sort of basically that coach on the field. And it sounds like he was just that in college. If you're doing that at the college level, you're probably doing that at the high school level too. I remember he got an extra year of eligibility, I think, to play. It was just like the ultra respected player at Pitt, and it seems like he was at Central Dauphin.
Yeah, and he really kind of set the tone. Obviously, CD didn't win the state title till later that year in 2011. Beating North Penn there, but he really sort of brought all those guys along, and just all those guys who came back for that year, that championship year. Rao has credit in that championship. He really does. And again, being a technician and just sort of being just knowing every singular part of his position and what his job is. And then to top all that and kind of be the on-field leader he was an incredible talent. He really was smart as a whip.
Stone, obviously.
Yeah. Stone, obviously, you got a state that produced Joe Montana, Jim Kelly, Johnny Unitas, Matt Ryan. There are just tons of names. Joe Namath, he's the all-time leading passer. Alex Irby's number 2. Kentucky, he's at Kentucky now. No brainer. You couldn't have him not on the list with when he's at the top of the list with all those guys. And then Drew Scales is an interesting one. I've heard a lot about him. Here's a nugget for you, Ep, you didn't have in there. Drew Scales this year named the first head coach of Penn State Harrisburg's women's flag football team.
Nice.
So he's coaching college football, just a little bit different than you might expect. But he was a really nice player. I've seen a lot of guys, as I say, give him his flowers when they talk about good players in the area.
Yeah, Scales was just like, it was just like literally, I probably could have wrote 3,000 words on Scales, just because he was one of those guys that just came up with a big play out of the blue, or when you needed it. Like his career was, I felt like his career was nothing but big plays. Like what isn't in here either is I don't know how many return touchdowns he's had. But I think his senior year, I think he had 6. And then I also think he ran 2 I think he had 2 pick sixes too. So it was like, it was just ridiculous on how many touchdowns this guy would produce or big plays he would produce. And obviously the stretch run there in their championship season was just unbelievable. I mean, it was snowing, it was icy. And then sure enough, when they needed it, 4th down, boom, they go to him, catch, go in, and then the rest is history. So and he had a really good career at Slippery Rock as well. He was a guy too that just, you don't forget what he did for the Rams. And that to me was the reason he got on this list.
Last 5 real quick. Michael Schuster, quarterback, Camp Hill, 2016, put up a whole bunch of passing yards.
Yeah.
College coach now, kind of like Matt Johnson. Mikael Simpson, running back, Harrisburg, 05. He shared your list and said he is still to this day the only guy from the area who's committed on ESPN. I just want to say that's nice and all, but Micah committed on PennLive, Mikael, so that's bigger. But obviously, really great player there. Had a whole bunch of offers. Nice career at Virginia. Kevin Snyder, fullback linebacker, Cumberland Valley. It's funny because I'm friends with a lot of guys over in the city. I see his name brought up a lot too. Like Harrisburg and Cumberland Valley aren't the best of friends, but he gets his respect when people talk about. I saw somebody said that he hit them harder than anybody who's ever hit them.
The thing about Snyder is he was pride on hitting you as hard as you possibly could, and then he would pick you up.
Yeah. Noah Spence, the defensive end from McDevitt, 2012 grad, and then Nate Stupar, the defensive end linebacker for State College, 07 grad. Stupar and Spence obviously played in the league too. Really solid 5 to close it out. Any thoughts there?
I think most, just because it's, we're now 15 years past it, but was just sort of the attention that Noah Spence got in high school was the most zany and ridiculous recruiting prospect that I've ever seen. Like I remember his dad used to have to just say, we don't answer the phone from 6 to 9 o'clock at night. and the letters that came in the mail, like we had a picture of him for our special preview tab going into his senior year. And he's sitting on his bed in his room, and the stacks of letters from college coaches. Because remember, it wasn't, social media and all that stuff and emails and all that wasn't massive yet. The recruiting sites were just kind of, ratcheting up. And so it was all mailers. And I swear the one pile was about 6 foot high. I mean, he was inundated. He was the number 1 recruit in the country, and number one defensive end in the country. So I think it was something like he was close to 70 offers. So it was just ridiculous. And obviously he had the talent. I mean, he racked up sacks like, Barr racked up tackles. That's how good he was. And he just had a singular focus. And obviously, things went a little shifted on him at Ohio State, but, he made it to the NFL, knocked around a little bit in the NFL. So, but just his high school career was crazy, just was crazy.
Kevin Snyder, also a New England Patriots Super Bowl champion, by the way. So
yes.
He has that distinction. I believe he was on the Seattle, he was on the Malcolm Butler interception team.
And I have to credit Andrew Shea. He and I, we nicknamed him the Predator.
I mean, that sounds, based on his rep, that sounds like a good rep.
And that nickname has stuck. Yes. Yes.
Simpson's a guy that people always talk about too. People always spoke really highly about him. And again, I always say if you get offers from those SEC schools up here, I think that's what really speaks volumes because, Big Ten schools, they can just offer some PA kids and be like, hey, we're offering you. SEC schools have to really want you, I feel like, to kind of make all the effort to go and offer you.
To add to that, Dan, think of the time too. 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When Florida and Alabama and UCLA come calling.
Yeah.
So they're not making the trip or they're not, expressing interest in getting you unless you're an absolute stud.
Yeah. And then Stupar.
Yeah, go ahead. Stupar, obviously, underrated career. Hung around the NFL for a while.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. It was interesting how great coach Al Wolski was there forever and, how he used Nate. And Nate was one of those. Nate was so versatile, too. I mean, you don't figure like, okay, he plays defensive end and he's a tight end. Sometimes you feel like those guys are limited to those two spots. But Stupar was so athletic that you could put him in a linebacker. You could probably put him at free safety and he'd do a hell of a job for you. And not to mention, he was a really solid producing tight end. That was, he was defensive player of the year named by the state. And obviously he Mid-Penn All-Star and all those things, and got drafted eventually. So yeah, he had a tremendous season. I mean, there were a couple obviously state college guys who were in the mix. I mean, you guys know this. There are a couple programs in the Mid-Penn, a long-time Mid-Penn college, that if we did a 25 just for those programs, we'd have a stellar list. So State College might be one of them, to be honest with you.
So my wife just dropped off the steak and shrimp, so let's wrap this show up. But I do want to take it there real quick. Obviously, one of the fun things about this is that people sometimes attack us around these lists. Look, you put a lot of effort into this. You crowdsourced it a good bit.
I saw Epps list he's working from. If people think he didn't consider someone, he considers.
So you crowdsourced it, but also it's our picks too at the end of the day. And we do it realizing that there's some really good players. Like, I think this is a really good list. And I had a couple people who I thought should be on there. I don't know who I would tell you to take off. Like, for instance, I really thought somebody said Brandon Hickerson-Rooks, the defensive end linebacker from City East. I loved him because he was a little bit undersized, but he played with heart and just like a tiger, and he was unblockable in high school. Somebody said Rob Martin. I didn't see him as much in high school. I do know he had an injury, but hell of a player who, despite some injuries, hung around the NFL a little bit. Yep. Ethan Cooper, I know, was a really good lineman.
Jeremiah Young was the other one that a bunch of people.
Jeremiah Young had a great career. Those are some names just like off the top of the list who I think, are on that fringe who, if anybody wanted to argue, I wouldn't necessarily argue with them. Like I said, I don't know who I would cut off this list. But who were maybe a couple guys that you guys saw, you and Dan saw that people talking about, or that you had right there too, who it was really hard to leave off, or like even if somebody wanted to put them on, you wouldn't argue. Not saying who we would take off, but you wouldn't argue with them.
No. I'll divulge this, and I showed the list to my initial list to Dan. There were 83 guys.
Yeah.
That I dug out and really considered for this list. And if somebody had any one of these 83 guys on their list, their 25, I probably wouldn't argue it at all. To be honest with you, Hickerson-Rooks, you mentioned, was in that period between like 16 and 19 was very interesting. There were a lot of guys. There were probably 15 guys in that stretch.
Daquan Anderson-Butts, we don't bring him up. He was an Under Armour All-American, a hell of a player.
Anderson-Butts was part of that group. I mean, you had just from Harrisburg, you had Kane Everson, unbelievable athlete. Andre White Jr., who wound up at Texas A&M, played linebacker. And then you had other guys like Onassis Neely, the running back at East Pennsboro, who set program records. Charlie Katshier was in that range. DB and wide receiver at Cumberland Valley.
Katshier's a good one.
Bill Williams from Camp Hill was unbelievable.
Bill Williams is a good one.
Had a high school career. And another guy who was often overlooked because he played at Shippensburg was Cody Gustafson, a wide receiver.
Yeah, really good.
That kid caught everything. And was one of the best receivers. And, you can't tell me that he wouldn't have been an ace, a number one on any one Mid-Penn squad there was. He was that good. And then went out, obviously, to Grove City and set all kind of records. Another one we talked about.
Smith's another Shippensburg kid who was really good.
Anthony Smith was in the mix. Jihad Neibauer, unbelievable athlete at CD East, obviously. So there were a lot of guys. Keontae Lucas was another guy I considered.
Keontae Lucas.
So that in that 16 to 19 patch, there were a lot of possibilities in there. And earlier too, a couple other Harrisburg guys. I know we did get a response about Brandon Ware. Brandon Ware was on my 2 years ago. I did a list of my 50 favorite players that I covered. Brandon Ware was on that list. Mm-hmm. So and so was Josh Potts, the defensive back at Harrisburg, who, when you talk about thumper, he was Ronnie Lott. This guy, he wanted to take your head off.
Harrisburg is tough, and I ran into this doing basketball. It's like they have so many good athletes. It's almost hard to you could just make a whole list of Harrisburg players. Like in basketball, I could have been Quincy Roberts was a big cut for mine. It's like there's so many guys all throughout these years.
And even if we did this list 6 weeks from now, I'm convinced 5 of them would be different.
Heck, the guy I was going to say
would be different.
The guy I was going to say from when I've been here. He might not be, in terms of athleticism or in terms of where he ended up in college, be the most, but Terrell Reynolds was a super productive football.
Absolutely.
Riley Robel and Terrell Reynolds.
Yep. It was closer. Closer to where we are. Riley Robel is on that list. I mean, just the McDevitt guys who are not on this list. Rico Scott, who's currently at Alabama. Kobe White, who had an unbelievable high school career and excelled at Boston College. Riley Robel, you mentioned. Andre Robinson was a tremendous running back.
Yeah, Riley Robel's still impressive.
I mean, hell, Fred Lee was the quarterback and guided McDevitt. Jason Cates was a defensive lineman who was tremendous. In I think he was like 06 or 07 graduate. And then we had a couple other quarterbacks too that had big numbers. Chase Steele big numbers. Marcus Stone, who went to NC State, had big numbers. So there's been a long line of quarterbacks at McDevitt. I don't think any of them trump Matt Johnson, but Stone and numbers wise, yeah. But so there's a tremendous amount of players and just what we wanted to do too, and what I wanted to attempt to do, was obviously not slight the first 10 years of the 2000s. You know what I mean? Because those are the guys that are obviously it's 20 years, 25 years gone by. So there were a lot of key names that just actually wound up in the NFL. Aaron Berry was another one, defensive back at McDevitt.
I think you could make an argument for Mekhi Flowers his junior year, especially when you look at his career. He was one of the best in the state, led Skill High to a state championship in the state. Now he's at Akron.
I mean, I talked to a couple guys about Clem Johnson, the quarterback at Carlisle. Clem Johnson was he was sort of as electric as Dupree, but just in a 6'2" body or 6 foot body. And, he wound up, he played a little bit at NC State. So it's just there's, again, my initial list was 83. So how do you nitpick and how do you whittle that down to 25? It's an arduous task. It really is.
Yeah. It was a good list. And we, like I said, we do these knowing that it sparks discussion and not to diss anybody. There's some guys that we just talked about who we wouldn't be talking about otherwise. Dan again brought up Terrell Reynolds, and I jumped to Riley Robel because he just threw it in my head because those guys were like in a neck and neck for defensive player of the year. Riley Reynolds was our defensive player of the year 2 years in a row. I think both his last 2 years he had over 20 sacks each year.
Yep.
These are all, he's got their season record for sacks, not Micah Parsons. So, there's a lot of guys. I think every time I tell somebody we make a list like this is our list. This is who we pick. This is who we, got from a lot of people, too. And this is what we came to. But, your list might look different. And I'm not going to tell you your list is wrong either. When you put your top 25 guys.
It's not worth disrespect. Like, another guy I know we got some emails about was Dan Lawler from Mechanicsburg, who ended up fullback at there's so many good players over a 20. I think people underestimate
25 years.
I think people underestimate 25 years, 30 schools in football. That's 50 to 100 players at each school. I'm not going to do the math on that. I did want to ask you guys before we hop off, when we do this in 2050 and we're all still working at PennLive and super healthy and running marathons and everything, which player playing right now would you put your life savings on would be on the list?
Out of this group, like the top 50
this year, who do you think is putting you on the spot?
I got us in high school now that because like you could make it easy one be like Micah or the Sean would still be there. But you're talking about right now playing. I mean, I think Kevin Brown is. If Kevin Brown doesn't play in the NFL, I think he's going to act in movies or wrestle in the WWE.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's tough. There are a lot of. It's also hard at the beginning of the football season to do it. I think one of those Harrisburg kids, either Koch, Mickens, or Brown, if they're not on this, so it'll be a pretty big surprise. I think honestly, Elias might end up being as productive as any of them. He's been a starting wide receiver 4 years, and the team's been so good all 4 years.
You know what? He's also apparently now. If you had to pick a top 50 beards of the first 50 years, he would be on there because that kid's rocking a full beard now.
Yeah.
I told his mom he looks like he's 26.
And who knows?
She sent me a picture of him at his 13th birthday party and like he was 9. So I don't know.
Yeah. And who knows? Torrin Evans might have, by the end of his career, he might have some Susquehanna Township record. So who knows?
So look, we're at 58 minutes, guys, and I got a steak in front of me and some big old shrimp, and I'm ready to go. I take a vitamin a day, and it's called a steak, the old Mike Ditka thing on kicking and screaming or whatever. Look, our list is our list. I think it was a pretty good list up. I know you put a lot of work into it. We still would love to, hey, you guys want to tell us who you thought should have been on your list?
Yeah, we have a survey.
Or who would be on your list? Hit it. Yeah, make sure you check that out on PennLive. We've got a lot of stuff coming. Football's just right around the corner. Epler, as he said, has got his rankings coming out. There's all kind of preseason all-star lists coming out. And it's not just for football in the Mid-Penn. We're going to do some statewide stuff, too. And so we're going to be loaded down from now until Christmas.
Yeah.
And football never really ends at PennLive. So make sure you check us out there. Dan, tell them how to find you on social media.
_Sostek.
Yep, tell them how to find you.
I am at 3Jacker.
Make sure you follow those guys. They're going to be out in the field. I'll be watching along. I'm at Sports by B. Linder on X. Megan, our producer, is tell them where to find you, Megan.
At Savvy Literate.
And she's waiting.
Follow her for your Dragon Con updates coming up. Legitimately asked if dragons were real today. That is my dog telling me it's time to go.
I never traveled to see dragons. I was just curious. Does
goes
Savvy Literate know something that we all don't? That's what
PennLive. PennLive.com. It is football season. We even got Eagles, Penn State, and Steelers stuff rocking. Nick Faribault with the Steelers, Johnny McGonigal with the Eagles, and Flounders, Max Ralph, and all those guys with the Nittany Lions. Guys, football season. PennLive.com. Check us out there. We'll see you next week.